And there you are, little carrot top, little diet and all puff. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Lant, I'm speaking to you from International Capital of the Internet, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Been a lovely day. Yes, it rained a bit, but we needed a bit of the rain, so it was okay. And the marathon passed without incident. And we're getting the usual leaders from Kenya and Ethiopia. That's where they did every year. Why don't they just move to Boston? Why bother to have them there? We always wonder, are they bred to run? Because they smack us every year. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's a fair and square. 30,000 runners joined the fray. All enormous record. They're still coming in. They'll be coming in till midnight. And let me say, to those of you who don't know anything about the psychology of the Boston Marathon, let me give you a quick thing. Because they're now out in my park, the Cambridge Common, in their aluminum foil capes, running around like Superman in their leotards and their super, and they'll wear those capes for days. They're one up with it. See, I ran. Liz, I don't know. 30,000 people. Can you believe it? There are really two races. There are the professionals who get, who are out there for the money and whatever. Then there are the average Joes and Janes, and who plod through the whole day. And they're the ones that we love. They're the ones that we admire so much. Have you ever been to the Boston Marathon?
Always wanted to, I just never did.
Well, we never do the things that are in our neighborhood. We absolutely don't. That's a rule of life. It's an amazing event, even if you, first of all, you can't avoid it. On marathon day, you can't do it. The reason that we have the marathon at all is because of Patriots Day, and I live on a street called Fallen Street, and there's a path along Fallen Street where Dr. Dawes, D-A-W-S, who was sidekick to Paul Revere, went to warn the British were coming, went up by land, to it by sea, and they galloped right past my house, and I know that because the Historical Commission, this whole area, by the way, every single thing in it is historical, and we replenish the horses' hooves in the cement every few years because tourists steal them. That's why they're out there with their chisel, taking the hooves out of the side. What's wrong with people? What do they bother on doing? We are very fortunate tonight to have a historical lady on our hands. It's always a pleasure to see her because she's sharp. She doesn't look like the sharp talking, the whiz kid of New York. But
Thanks, Michael.
It's always a pleasure to have Elizabeth here. Doesn't she look radiant tonight? If there's a person who generates joy and love, it's Elizabeth. Is your husband with us tonight, or is he inadvertently detained at the tavern?
Well, he's out of town. He's out of state working.
Well, you have to make do with me. So here's the deal. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about average people, given the circumstances, can become historic figures for time and must leap ahead to seize the moment. 2 years ago, Liz, 2 years ago, can you believe it? Literally, time does fly. Why don't we start by telling about what was going on, and I'm going to have you jump in with what you did, and I'm going to read it a little bit to the folks. They can ask us any questions. I first heard about the Boston Massacre in the afternoon 2 years ago, and I started getting phone calls from my friends right away that says, "Are you okay?" The "Are you okay?" calls went through the roof. The phone company crashed. I mean, this gives you a preview of what would happen in the event of a terrorist attack. I mean, not just a little one. I mean, multi-spaces and the whole bit. And I'm a commentator, and this is my line of work endeavor. But I decided with the magnitude of the result, I wouldn't write about it because 10,000 journalists were going to write about it, and they would cover every angle of the story. And besides which, I've done my stories on terror. I've written terrorist stories for 40 years, going back to the historical roots of terrorism in Ireland, and the UK, and the United States, and Ambassador Stevens. I've written about all this stuff, and frankly, I was exhausted mentally from this subject. It's very hard to write about innocent people who died, who should never have died, but who were unfortunate enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I went to bed for a little while, and I left the television on, which I never do. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine. He said, turn on the television immediately. He said, there's something on that you wanted to see. Well, I didn't have to turn it on. I was there. You have to get the picture. I don't sleep a very lot, so when I sleep dead to the world. I mean, I'm not easy to wake up. I could sleep through the San Francisco earthquake given the right circumstances. The television was on, and it showed Metropolitan Moving and Storage, which is a huge fortress building down next to MIT. Right, I live on Massachusetts Avenue on the Harvard side, and the storage, Metropolitan Moving and Storage, was on the MIT side, literally right across the street. They had the yellow crime scene tape up. The MIT security guard had been dead for all of 10 minutes. I assumed that the terrorists were going to bomb Metropolitan Moving and Storage because it would be another one of these symbols. Terrorists aim for some symbolic results. That's why they go after the Capitol, and they go after the White House, because of the symbolism of it all. In some senses, it's worth more than the damage, tangible damage. So I think all of a sudden I started having these flashbacks to all the things that I had in the warehouse, which was right behind the camera. My father's letters from the South Pacific in World War II. My parents were writing rings and love letters, my argumentative letters from my mother to college. The whole bit. First editions of books, endless documents. And I thought, this is great. I'm going to watch them grow up. And I finally fell asleep. I got a call in the middle of the night. Liz, do you have any idea what the call? I blanked out. I know that I was out looking at the television at 11 o'clock. We were watching 11 o'clock news. But do you remember approximately what time you got involved?
Well, it was shortly after I realized the warehouse was where all your things. Realized how close to you it was, and then it was like I was glued to the TV from that point.
What happened was we inadvertently became part of the story. The one thing that a journalist does not want to be is part of the story. So let's give the people the lowdown of where you were, where I was. I was interned in the perimeter marked off by the police and the National Guard and the Army. I was not allowed to go outside, and one of the freakier things that happened that night was when I went to go outside and put my hand on the doorknob of my house. Dr. Lant, get your hand off the doorknob. This means you sit down, get in your house. Whoa, that was the freakiest thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, I remember.
It wasn't just the announcement; it was my name. And I looked around. Who the hell is in there? Of course, you can't sleep after that. Forget that. That's the
no, and it's scary. It's like, why can't I go outside? Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's like, even if it was for something good, which in this case it was, someday you realize if they could do it, they could do it for something bad. So I get a call in the middle of the night. Go on.
Well, I think just being told you can't go out, it puts it into more of a perspective of how dangerous the situation really was.
Now, were we in well, first of all, I got this call from CNN Manitoba, Canada. I thought, who the hell is it? Where, why? Why Manitoba? They said, can you go on the air? They said, we understand you're a distinguished journalist and commentator who's living inside the perimeter. Would you care to comment on your situation? I said, when? They said, now. In 1 minute, when they called, I was on the air. And like I say, I was like, well, what did I have on? Well, like Marilyn Monroe, I had the radio on. That's what I had on. So, they said, just talk. Tell the people where you are. And we started to lay it out. Now, why this is important is because the perimeter is holding back all the journalists. We were now being inundated with National Guard, police from 6 states, sheriff's deputies from 6 states, all the way down to New Jersey, up to Maine. the Army, the National Guard, the Air Force, the planes from the were circling overhead, sometimes manned, sometimes drone. It was like seeing from hell. Now, throughout this time, I'm on the internet because my internet connection is never down unless there's a problem. If there's ever a problem, you know, if it's down, you know there's a problem. But I keep it on. I never turn it off, never, ever. So, how did we establish? I mean, I was on the screen, you were on the screen. Now, at this point, we decided to, because we had to create our own communications network. How did that exactly come about? I was there, you were there. Well, how did we do this?
Sure, I just know between the two of us, it was like nobody else was involved, or nobody else was even in the LBC, even though they were. It was like you and I were just totally into the story and what this guy was doing and where he was, where they were chasing him down and everything.
Liz English was responsible. First of all, I was on the air most of that time. Basically, they said, just tell us everything. And after I was on for about 10 minutes, they went for a commercial break, and the woman said, "You're really good at this. Have you ever done this before?" "Yeah, man, I was born with a microphone in my mouth." I said, "Thank you." She said, would you, and then the famous words in radio, "Will you stay with us? Stay with us, Dr. Network." And then if they notice a stereo in their voice, then maybe I'll go and fall asleep. "Will you stay with us, Dr. Network?" Well, first of all, I was exhausted. But I had the secret weapon in Liz English. She was on the screen, like she is right now. What were you saying to people? Because I was on CNN. You were feeding me stuff. We'll get to how that worked in a minute. But what were you doing up there?
On what was going on and where they were, where the search was. You had certain stations on, and I had other stations on. So we were watching it from two different directions. So we knew pretty much our chase and when the police were chasing the car, when the security guard got shot. You know, I remember when he got shot, and we were both devastated, thinking, "Wow, what and how desperate these people were."
You got to understand that the traditional media had none of this. They were feeding out. Like, for example, when we were putting together our apparatus, they were saying, "What did he study in high school?" They had
no.
And again, I'm going to try to piece you into the geography so you get the drift. I live in the penthouse right in the middle of Harvard Square, right across from Harvard Law School. You have to understand the way the land is. Right down about 4 blocks, there's a street called Norfolk Street, which is where the killers made their bombs. And now, after a couple of years, people are coming out of the woodwork saying, "Yeah, I saw what they were doing. I didn't know it was a bomb. I heard it, fixing the washing machine." Lots of people, including one of my best friends, he just told me this the other day. He said, "My back porch abuts their back porch." I said, "Did you think of telling?" "No, this is where we're crippled. Nobody wants to get involved. Nobody wants to say that they know anything. Nobody wants to have to present a deposition. No one's had a proof and say, 'Well, Dr. Lant, what do you know?'" Nobody wants that. How can we protect our society? We outnumber the terrorists by 350 million to 1. Why then do they have the total initiative? Why isn't it us? Because most people say, "I don't want to get involved." Well, I didn't want to get involved either. I wanted to put my head in the sand. It just didn't work out that way. I'm sure that Elizabeth didn't want to get involved, but she did. It was a decent thing to do, or the civic-minded thing to do, or it was the right thing to do. So, you ever think about that? That you were involved with, smoking out terrorists? When you were cooking, you say, "My God, I was on the front line against terrorism."
Oh, I never expected to be.
No, it just happened. That's the thing. These terrorists go anywhere they want, anywhere they want. So I stay on, and again, you're helping to flesh out my memory because it still has a very surreal quality to me, surrounded by every kind of militia, army, Navy. I don't know if the Navy was there, but if it wasn't, it's the only service that didn't manage to make it. But the Marines were here. The soldiers were here. Every politician in America came down, of course, to be photographed at the right place at the right time. They didn't get in at the perimeter. Nobody got in. So let's talk about how we divvied up the media outlets. Did you decide, or did I decide, or did we both decide that you were going to you were going to turn on ABC, NBC, CBS? We were going to deal with my information because I was able to tell you. You would say they're fighting, they're following the getaway car, and they're at the street. I said, well, that's 3 blocks from here. This is the terrain. I was able to fill in CNN.
I'm not sure what channel you had, but I had CNN on one television, and then I had NBC on another one.
Yeah. Well, I was on the telephone. I had the standard television on, which I just never watched. But I was on the telephone for hours, days, as a matter of fact. And I was on here, I see you got a picture. I'm on here too. I'm on the live business center, and I'm on the telephone, and I'm feeding. And the way the works is you can hear my telephone conversations, as many people are reporting, because I leave the phone next to the microphone, so that everybody knew what I was talking to CNN about. We were probably getting pretty interesting number of people at this point. My recollection is that we had a number of people who began coming in. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Because it wasn't just us, or was it?
No, you and I were talking about the bomber, but it was normal business in the LBC. They were working around us. The other monitors were taking care of the people that would come in, the associates in, and we were honed in on the bomber.
I think people didn't really understand where we were and why. They might have assumed it was like, how do you do to go to the movies?
I don't think they realized that you were right in the heart of the bombing area. Not until the next day when the articles started coming.
The articles, again, I think you have to understand what a terrible drain it is on one to constantly write about the death of young people, the death of innocent people, the death of small children. It's very devastating. And Elizabeth English is one good thing. She is very grounded. Plus, she cracks a mean whip in terms of any number of humor subjects we can go into tonight. At what point did you realize you really were part of the story?
When you went to bed and they were still looking for him. My concern was I was very connected to you, and I was scared to death. It was like you'd always been my neighbor, and here you were in danger, and I wanted to make sure if I saw this guy get close to your house or your apartment that I could warn you to get you out. I remember you went to bed and you said, that if you hear anything, call me. And I remembered when they found him in the boat, and I hate to get on the phone and wake you up.
Yes, you remember. I know. Thank you for sharing that with me, because I've forgotten. We now know several things that have, because of the commission that has been studying this for the last several months. We now know that, for those of you who have never been to New England is a little itsy-bitsy state. It's not like Nevada. It's not like New Mexico. It's like Rhode Island and Vermont. We are all very attached to each other, and it's just the 6 days. And the next town, what had happened was the killers had captured a Japanese, I think he was an educated professor at MIT, and he was terrified they would kill him. And one of the imponderables, and there are so many imponderables, is why they didn't kill him. They were bent on killing everybody else. But here's this Japanese fellow, his car is hijacked. They pull up to a convenience stand because they need to use the facility to get a Coke. The Japanese guy jumps out of the car, but his cell phone falls out. Now, that was the break of the case. He didn't like it very much that he lost his cell phone, but the police were delighted. Let's put this in perspective. The terrorists were building their bomb on Norfolk Street, which is a residential neighborhood, typical Cambridge neighborhood, lots of kids, lots of graduate students, lots of high school students, because it's right next to the high school. And they had decided they were going to detonate their explosive device at the 4th of July event on the Esplanade, with all those of you who do not have multi-million-dollar fireworks displays, and the grocery man who covers it because they're paid for by a foundation. The whole world comes to the Esplanade, and it's very casual, it's very fun. Everybody knows all the songs that are going to be played. Guest of honor will come and sing. We'll have the symphony orchestra, and pops, and it's a wonderful thing. It would have been devastating, absolutely devastating, if they'd gotten their device into the middle of the Esplanade concert, which they could easily have done. No one was expecting this. It was totally surprising. But they were worried that if you look at the calendar, they had too much time to elapse between April 15th and the 4th of July. It was too, and they were afraid that somebody would call the police, drop a dime program. And so they decided to switch their gear from Copley Square, from the Esplanade to Copley Square at the end of the marathon, and then make it down to Midtown Manhattan into Times Square. And they had enough explosives, or whatever you want to call it, because a lot of the stuff came out of Tag's hardware store in Porter Square, where they could easily walk there and get their goodies. And they had decided that they were going to build 2 of these devices. They would create mass chaos in Boston, down Highway straight down to New York. And remember, the sheriffs were coming the opposite way, and they hadn't captured him yet, and and it wasn't his car. They had stolen the Japanese car. Or, I'm sorry, that's wrong. They had stolen someone else's car. The Japanese guy saved the day inadvertently by giving the police the signal of the cell phone. Did you know any of that?
At the part where the security guard got shot. After your warehouse, they got the Japanese guy, remember? And they shot a security guard. He went to stop him or something.
Well, for whatever reason, the police ended up with his cell phone. And that was the break in the case.
Before that even, right. But this was young guy, young security.
The security guard story is particularly pathetic for the following reasons. I've thought about that enormous numbers of times. How it happened was, you've got to understand, this is a college town, people. This is where the biggest event was that we can now buy hamburgers until 4 o'clock in the morning. This is the big news of Cambridge. I'm not kidding. Harvard has taken out franchises on 2 hamburger chains because the president of Harvard is worried that they're not getting any student experience. Well, of course they're not. We have everything going on. We've had attacks on Harvard Square. We'll get into those in just a minute. So, of course, we don't have a typical Harvard college experience. What's the experience? But anyway, every time they moved, the police now knew where they were. They would say, so I'm in Cambridge, which is the big town, and the next town over is Watertown, which is where he was apprehended. 200 bullets, according to the commission that studied this, 200 bullets were shot in his direction. Apparently all missed. But the thing is now reported with the residents of Watertown were absolutely terrified. Many of them are elderly. Many of them are living at home by themselves. Many of them are very small families. It's a bedroom community, typical. It's a little Armenian bedroom community with high real estate prices and great restaurants. And they were terrified. They were trapped in their houses. And if you'll remember this, my personal fear was that they would do a home invasion, take the old folks or whoever was free,
yes.
They would capture them. And they would. Yeah. I remember that you and I discussed that because that was the next move, was that they would do home invasion in the middle of Watertown, and then we'd have a bloodbath for sure. What's come out along with the report is how trigger happy everyone was in the sheriffs. It turns out that, with the exception of the Cambridge and so forth, nobody was authorized to go to Watertown. They just went and shot their way through the town. This is causing a lot of disturbance among people who say, who the hell was minding the show? And to this day, having been through it, I I can't be absolutely sure who really was in charge. Let me tell you where that begins to affect me. And I'm sure you remember this. At some point along the way, you're probably dead tired right now. Are you? Are you? I don't mean now. I mean that.
No, I'm okay right now. No, I'm fine.
What about the night? What about the night of the event? Were you getting worn out?
Yeah, I was getting tired.
Did you stay up? Did you stay up all night with me, or did you go to sleep for a nap? Or what did you do?
You went to lay down. I made up my mind I couldn't go to bed until he was caught. That
I can just remember you saying that. You were fixated on the main event, which was the capture. I remember now how you were just on the money on that.
Just was bound and determined that, I wasn't going
to... Do you remember the next morning when I finally got to go out? First of all, I understood why the police told me to go to bed and lie down and look at all that. I didn't like it. But the next day, as it was light, I went outside, and do you remember the story of the tank on the grass?
It was when it really hit you how serious it was,
Now, Liz hasn't had the privilege, although she's been invited 100 times to come and have dinner with me. Just the two of us, of course. Oh, well, we'll invite Dave to dessert. You have to understand the geography. I live in a historic neighborhood. Every building is a historic this or that. I live on a property that was owned by Professor Fallen, who was the first professor of German and physical education at Harvard in the 1830s. And in those days, physical education and the German language were treated as the same subject. He was a premature abolitionist. When he was before the curve, he was out there hustling for black emancipation. And the citizens of Boston did not like that because they were making a ton of money in the slave trade. So they gave him a parish in New York City. He went down to New Bedford, Mass, the Fall River line, and there was a storm and he drowned. The whole town was ecstatic. And so they managed to mask that by naming every other street as Fallen Close, Fallen Street, Fallen this, Fallen that. And it's not F-A, it's F-O. Well, I got out and went down the elevator to the grass in front of the building, and I saw something there that I never ever thought I would see. There was a tank with the turret pointed right into the heart of Harvard College. And I snapped. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. In my neighborhood of education and academics and law, the rule of law with the law school. And I just broke down. I lost it. I was very upset. And I think you know that it reminded me of 1956 when I was 9. It was the first picture I ever remember from television was of a young freedom fighter in Budapest lobbying a Molotov cocktail and a tank. They were about to kill him. And it was that moment just before they blew his head off. And I said, I never ever thought we would become Eastern Europe with all that. It was devastating. Do you remember my telling you about that at the time?
I remember the look on your face when you come back and went on one of your walkabouts, you called them. Back at the realization that the tank was out there. You were shocked.
I do these walkabouts, which I don't do anymore because the last one in winter, I had to go to I was in the hospital for 5 days with pneumonia because I did a walkabout. I used to do a walkabout at Christmas Day at the stroke of 12, Christmas night, about what was happening in Cambridge, so a little town of Cambridge, Mass. It was, of course, patterned after a little town of Bethlehem. This was appalling and deeply distressing that we had reached the point where to protect ourselves we have to have tanks on the front grass. It was just devastating. I hope you're not frozen. Are you frozen? Whoop. Maybe I'm frozen. Am I frozen? Oh, good. You're good. You're moving again. All right. Thank you, Patrice. Patrice, how are we doing in our program? We're going to read a little bit now. I want to talk a little bit though, about how long did you stay with us? Because I know you were fixated on the capture of that boy. And you were one of the first people to hear that he was captured under that boat in water. And frankly, I'm going to say something that's going to sound odd. I wish he bled to death. We wouldn't then have our city torn with whether he should have capital punishment or whatever. He done his damnedest. And the last thing he did was in death, in judgment rather, because he's definitely not dead. He divided the city. He just divided the city yet again. He would have bled to death. In the interest of bringing the people of Boston down from their hysteria, which is what it was. What do you think of that? Or what do you remember at that point about the investigation?
It wouldn't hurt. Would have been a blessing to everybody to have him gone, you know.
Well, he'll be with us now forever, and he will gain a following. People who are beginning to wish that he was liberated. My own fear is that he'll be out in 30 years. That sounds like a long period of time, but it isn't.
Wasn't a boat, an overturned boat, Mark.
Yes, it was a reasonably large one because he was in there taking notes, writing his declaration.
Tart, like a white tart.
Now, before I read the story about that tonight, I want to pump you for everything you know. Is there anything that I should be asking that I'm not? Because this is all being recorded for posterity.
That's right. As far as I remember. It brings all the feelings back of that day. Scary it was.
You know, I'll tell you, it was so into the moment, you're going to laugh or laugh, maybe not laugh. But
I know it was just Dr. Lant and I, Patrice.
It's me. I'm trying to get it back.
Not too many other people in the LBC really realized what was going on. And I can't remember the other monitor that was on at the time. Dr. Lant was actually writing a normal day article at the time.
Sorry, I have my name up twice. It's causing me echo. Let me get it.
Yeah, it was quite the day, Patrice. I'll never forget it.
All right. Sorry. I'm not very good at computers, as everybody knows. Technology is not my forte. But I will tell you, I was feeding CNN pages as I wrote them. And for those of you that don't use the information that I've created, that's a very serious error. Because here you've got a top copywriter and historian working for you and you don't use the stuff. That's crazy. Do you want to speak to that?
It wasn't actually, it was just not quite 24 hours, Patrice. Most was, because it was getting dark, and they didn't think they were going to get him. Dr. Lant was exhausted, as she usually is, and he wanted to go lay down. Anything happens, you call me. They were going to get him that night. We really didn't. I was so happy to call you.
First of all, it's nice to have a red-haired daffodil seed elf like Elizabeth. And Elizabeth and I have a long-running joke that when she applied to be a monitor, I basically looked at her and said, "Of course you're kidding, right?" And she got so angry with me that she said, "I'll show him." You know, I have used those words with other people. You were a supremely good monitor. I'd love to have you back if that ever happened. And because you understood the need for people having help. And we're going to discuss that in a minute. For me, by now, the biggest mistake that I made that night was I didn't ask for a letter immediately from CNN. It just, and you know what triggered this? You're going to laugh. My mother's deceased, as you know, and she had a lot of radio and television tapes that I'd done over the years, particularly from the early 80s. And I thought they were lost. I thought that when her effects were, you know, how children are, they throw everything when they throw the Declaration of Independence away. I think didn't fit into their schemes. So my sister somehow got this portmanteau of these videotapes that I did. There's about 20 hours, I think, of videotapes that I did, and George Kosh has posted them, and you can see them in the video locker on the left-hand side, and they are knockouts. It was like I was in a memory clinic. This stuff just popped out. I never asked CNN for a letter saying, this is what we did, this is what you did. It was stupid. But we were in the moment. We were really in the moment. And very caught up with providing our audience with quality information quickly. And frankly, we just got exhausted. I think you and I together would have been made like one person, one normal sleeping person, because we were very caught up. And that's when the article that I'm going to read to you came in. Do you remember this article? Before I give you a little quiz. And we're going to read it now. So and I want to just go on record. I really want to go on the video and say that I was so lucky to have you, Elizabeth English, on the team, thinking when a person like me is in the moment, I'm not thinking about eating, I'm not thinking about sleeping, I'm not thinking about the dog next door, I'm thinking about whatever I'm looking at. And I'm quite capable of being totally oblivious. And she was there, she was sentient, she made the right decisions, and we supplied the world with higher quality information than any of the networks, except for CNN, of course. It was because of Liz English and because of me. And the people that were in there, I don't really remember who's in there anymore. But if you were here with us that 2 years ago, by all means, let us know. You deserve the recognition as well. Do you have anything to say before I read this article? I'm going to read this because it's a historic document of a person who was present at one of the prime catastrophes in the city of Boston. Boston's been here a very long time. This is one of the saddest moments. And this is the article I never wanted to write. It's entitled, Ma, I'm Hurt Real Bad. Boston, April 15th, 2013. To experience the joy of spring in New England, and in its first and principal city since its inception in 1630, you must have faced and survived the very real rigors of the New England winter, as only the genuine New Englander can do. Resolute people, determined people, people for whom the very idea of tenacity was created. These are the people who know the rancor and the bone rattling chill the old Atlantic has thrown at its stubborn inhabitants each wintry season since there were such inhabitants, daring them to spend yet another exacting season on the inauspicious pied-à-terre that pilgrims audaciously decreed would be their godly capital. And so, fearing nothing but God, they began, little knowing how many challenges there would be, but bolstered by the living God, facing each one as it came, no matter what it was or how it seems. These are the kind of people who in this often grim, demanding geography built their shining city on a hill. These are the kind of people who sustain it. For we are vigorous people who are grown up, sometimes daunted, sometimes misguided, sometimes stumbling, but always advancing, renewing, improving, even when our heart is breaking, as it most assuredly is breaking now. For the musical accompaniment to this article, I've chosen one of the most soothing and uplifting compositions, because I feel sure composer Aaron Copland meant it especially for moments like now. This is Appalachian Spring, and I recommend you go now to any search engine and listen to it carefully. For your soul has needed of it, there is sure to come the day when it will go. This radiant achievement was first recorded October 7th, 1945. It caught the sound of the great republic as she moved out of the massive burden of war and took her great place on the world stage as the one certain hope of every person who loved freedom and all its works. One of the first recordings was made in Boston, the uneasy, restless, aspiring city where every corner, every location, every crooked, narrow lane revealed another aspect of what this place and its people had done for themselves as they forged revolution here in order to secure liberty everywhere. The world took note of Boston and knew that here important things had been done, things which might benefit them. And so the unyielding land of New England and its principal city changed the world, admonishing the good people everywhere to see what they had done to shape the better life, urging them to do as much for themselves and to do it as well. Into this great city of liberty came people determined to use that liberty to confound that liberty, wreak grievous havoc, and inflict mayhem and pain on a perfect April day when spirits were high and joyous and all New England was living. By the flowers of springtime we had all been waiting for. These people came to kill, and they did kill, came to maim, and they did maim, came to show what purposeful menace might do, and they did show. Thus a mother heard in disbelief and horror, but her son called on this April day to say, "Ma, I'm hurt real bad." He had lost both legs to the people of purposeful menace. Then, shortly after she learned his second son had lost both his legs too, her dismay now complete. In this way, the bright promise and happiness of the day died, to be replaced by disbelief, lamentation, and wonder that the work of so few could disrupt so many so completely and create so much pain. The universal question, how could this happen? Martin Richard. Of those killed, I felt an immediate affinity for Martin Richard. Why? Because he was a boy who wrote improving messages on poster board. What's so important about that? Just this. I was such a boy myself, and spent happy world-changing hours crafting my post-protected markers like Martin. Just so. School election posters, powerful lines taken from a well-thumbed Bartlett's familiar quotations, the ones designated to decorate my room, often featuring the strongest possible warnings to a younger brother who wanted in, but I was determined he should stay out. And of course, the pièce de résistance, masterworks laboriously created to be displayed in presidential elections, then kept proudly for years in my clothes closet until they, tattered, still venerated, profoundly admired, were in shreds. He was just 8, and his latest beauty, hand-lettered as usual, set him out for no more hurting people. Peace. It was festooned with those hard-to-make symmetrical hearts, the beloved of the young and the very young in spirit. The peace symbol anchored the bottom, standing alone in majesty, the better to make sure people knew it was a thing of the utmost significance and Martin's credo. Of course, as many different colors as the young, inventive mind could conceive were riotously used to create this baby. He reckoned that such an important message called for such an abundance of colors the world had never seen. Thus he applied his choices with verve, lavishly, restraint unthinkable. It is perhaps the last picture of Barton. He stands before the world, a wisp of a lad no heavier than a sack of potatoes, as my grandfather used to say. A smile a tad sheepish, proudly showing the message that was the heart of his endeavor. He died in an instant. His mother and sister were severely injured, and so the youthful advocate for what the world needs now became a mangled thing of blood, disfigurement, and death. Thus he touched the world and became the very symbol for what we so desperately need and can never have enough: peace. One hopes for the exit of God so that Martin Richard can abound eternity and serenity with the peace he urged upon us all, the peace he had for himself such a little time. 4:21 p.m. Eastern. Are you all right? The voice at the other end was my best of friends. Turn on NPR at once. Are you all right? And so the great matter was brought with urgency to my attention by someone who watches out for me. By that time, the cell phones of the world were overwhelmed by the calls of the near, dear, and concerned, all having but a single refrain: are you okay? In such ways does love work. And if there was malice that day on the part of a handful, we demonstrated love. And as these calls were made so numerous that even the most sophisticated systems were overburdened and crashed, the people of Boston did what they have done since 1630 in the face of every calamity. They said a little prayer, dusted themselves off, and helped the sore afflicted as best they could until the great resources of the great city could be summoned and brought to bear. For this is the city of the living God, as eternal in the eternal city itself, the city the pilgrims wrought from the inhospitable and daunting terrain, the very definition of fortitude, endurance, courage, and unflinching resolution. This is the city which gave the men of 75 the ideas that changed the course of world events and the lives of millions, including generations unborn. We are the people of Boston, current custodians of her universal renown. And if our pain today is sharp, deep, and acute, we have not bowed before the unfolding tragedy. That is not the way of this place and its people, even under the greatest duress. There have been great tragedies in these hallowed precincts before. There will be great tragedies again. We shall rise to every occasion, just as we have risen to this one. In this way we honor our ancestors and provide the righteous example for those who, in the fullness of time, will take on this essential of our greatness and our humanity. Still hard to get through it, you know. So I just want to be sure that everyone realizes Liz English was there. She was inventive. She was creative. She was nurturing. She was maternal. She was thoughtful.
In the picture of Martin on that we used for the article that day, the picture of Martin. Colored picture.
Yes, it's right in front of me now. And William Buck will post the link for the article. And the first thing you see is that boy who would have been 10 years old. Just 10. Liz, you and I have lived through some historic events. Let's remember that we did our share.
Oh,
If anyone wants to ask any questions or come up to say anything, this would be the moment to do it. And one of the greatest things that George Koch gave us, and I know he didn't plan on this, it happened, was this live business center. Yes, we make money for people here every day, every hour of every day, and we're glad to do it. And they need the help, and we can provide it. But we go beyond that. It's not enough to have money, and the world is crumbling. And Liz, just the other day, I was reading an article that said that 221 million young people around the Eastern Mediterranean, in Egypt, in Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, will never get one day of education in their lives, not a single day. With all that entails, and that will be the prime picking grounds for the next group of terrorists. And let me tell you this, folks, they are learning. Every time there is an incident, they learn from that incident. But do we learn? No. we throw our tennis shoes on the branch of his tree and say we've done it good. I, been seared by terrorism, can come at any time, in any guise, and hurt any person, innocent or not. It's a tragedy of our times that we're Buffalo and how to handle it. All it would take would be that single helicopter that flew out of the grounds of the Capitol a few days ago, getting through the security perimeter, and we say to ourselves, we spent trillions of dollars, and he sails in. That could have been the end of Washington, D.C. It would have been, well, it's called a dirty bomb. Dirty bombs don't weigh very much, they don't have to. So, friends, we need to work together. We need to use our communications devices and do what Elizabeth did. She stepped to the forefront. She didn't ask why, wherefore, or how much. She said, I'm here, I'll help. And by God, if that isn't what we all need to hear every single day of our lives. Thank you, Elizabeth. I want you to say your any last thoughts. You are now immortalized in more than my heart. You have been elevated to celluloid or whatever it is.
That's what the monitor system here at Worldprofit does. You know, and I never did make a video for you. One day, the last time I was in the hospital, it was real bad, 14 days on life support, and Dave called you. They didn't think I was going to make it. And I came home, and I was weak. I mean, I was weak. I didn't know what I was going to do. And you want to know what happened to me? A monitor that knew me called me. Anita Lee. Remember Anita Lee, the Japanese girl?
I do.
It was 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and Dave kept going, who's calling? Who's calling? I mean, Dr. Lant, I didn't think I'd be able to use a computer again. I could barely breathe. I was as limp as a kitten, and I was ready to give up. And Anita Lee called me, and she said to me, Liz, you don't understand how much you touched me when we worked together in the LBC. And at first I couldn't figure out who it was. And then it hit my brain, and I was like, oh my, really did affect somebody's life. And you don't know how much that meant to me and how much it brought me back. It was amazing. It truly was amazing. But it brought me back. It truly did. It really helped me to think, you know, wow, I do have it. I can do this again. Well, here I am, you know. And so I never got to tell you that.
I don't know what to say. It's humbling. I never thought, you know, I tell this story as it's kind of a joke and kind of true. See, how did you get to be the CEO in an ITT company? And I said, I went to the men's room. And by the other stockholder said, let Jeffrey do it. And that's how I was elevated to greatness. I never asked what the job entailed, and so I've come to see that it entails such things as just, we're a people business. We have people, they have problems every day. There's not a single day that goes by that we're not having a monitor problem every day, whatever it is. And you learn to roll with those punches. But the important thing is that we are here for each other, sharing information. The essence of this place is sharing. And one of the things that we have to discover is how to keep it going without exhausting ourselves. Because as we all know, 20% of the people, 80% of and the good people must have nurture. They must have time off. They must have flowers. They must have chocolate bars. And they must have inordinate sunshine time. And that sounds rather frivolous perhaps, but it's absolutely true. The good people that keep this place going are in the Protestant tradition, are the saints, those that are going to march in. And I want to go through the list, and I want to recognize for posterity the Cowalts, who have had a presence with us for a long time. George Kosh is here, doing his magic. I phoned to Telemonk, who needs to learn to not hide out and come forward and work with us. Jeremiah, who's surprising us all by how he's grown. My God, I looked at him the other day and I said, you look like a real person now, as opposed to a leprechaun. set loose in the zoo. Of course, we have Mark Whalen from Illinois, who is just as steady as they come. Mike Camary, who we're so pleased to have him come back to us. Patrice Porter, with whom it would never be a party. If you wanted to feel Patrice is yours, you wouldn't have to call her. She's dependable as they come. Tanya Vick, who's had some health problems of her own, doesn't let her get her down. She's here all the time. And who are my other names there? I think there's another name there. William Buck, of course. You know, I never thought that a Louisville slugger like Reverend Buck and a Harvard whippersnapper like me would get together and change the world. He's wonderful to work with. He's dependable. We wouldn't do without him. And if there are any more names on there, someone maybe can list up we'll do that, show me that. We are the product of each other's strengths and up with each other's weaknesses, for we all have both strengths and weaknesses. I was really pleased, Liz, that you would join us for this program. Do you have any last thoughts? Remember, this is for posterity.
I enjoyed excuse me, I enjoyed my last hour with you. A better way to spend it.
You know. Is there anyone supposed to say anything? Put it on the screen. Now, this is Dr. Jeffrey Lant. I just take honor and privilege of my colleague during the terrible days of the maritime killers. Privileged to have a person like you with such empathy, sincerity, and love. May I say love? I'm saying
yes,
that
you can. You can. You're welcome, Patrice. Thank you.
Anything else, we are thankful that you're so well. You are testing for the Guinness Book of Records. Keep testing.
I plan on it, sir.
We're going to go back to regular business now. Go on. Go on and say anything your heart desires. Blurt it out.
Hi, everyone.
That was Elizabeth English, who a long-time friend of Worldprofit and our administration. It's always good to see her. And I want to return to radio programming. For all of those of you who are listening in the rafters, you've got no clue what you're turning down if you do not come with us. This is much more than just a business program opportunity. This is a life opportunity. Do you have a comment, Mr. Buck?
And that's what we want to let you know. Between Miss Elizabeth English and Dr. Lant, the story was told then, and it's being told now. That's what we here what we try to do. We try to share with you how you can affect the world and how you can be effective in your own life by joining us and be a part of Worldprofit. We congratulate Dr. Lant and Miss Elizabeth English for the outstanding jobs. And Miss Patrice Porter is doing this recording.
Now, the people that understand what we do, this is a lifetime play. There's so many cross currents of good relationships built up in the Live Business Center. I have never seen, nor have you ever seen, a so-called business opportunity like this, for whom this is interpreted in the broadest possible way. We help people universally. We're helping as many as we can to build, to just have a few $100s a month extra in the United States currency means all the difference. What we've got to get them past is there is a colossal belief in what the scammers say. They promise the moon and deliver lamentation. We promise you fellowship and give you a lifetime business to boot with an income if you'll follow the directions. On that happy note, are you the next dealer of note, Mr. Bush?
Yes, sir.